the April 11th meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville. I'm Kevin Lynch, president of the club. And I'd like to invite to us to the podium. Providing invitation today is Jeff Underhill of Underhill Associates, president, and member of the 1912 Society and Paul Harris Fellow.
Last Wednesday was the 50th anniversary of the F5 tornado that brought major damage to Louisville. The day before, many of us headed to the basement as a result of threatening storms. Both events serve as a reminder of greater powers than us. As we near the celebrations of the 150th Kentucky Derby, let us give thanks for our many blessings, including our mostly beautiful spring weather and the rebirth it brings. As Rotarians, we each have certain resources, and as a club, we have even greater powers. Let us give thanks for our many blessings by using our resources to spring our city forward. May we strive to live by the letters of spring. Let us be supportive of many worthy causes. Let us be productive at work and in our community. Let us continually reinvent ourselves and our city. Let us be inspired. Let us be non-judgmental. And let us always be growing. Happy spring, happy 150th Derby.
Thanks, Jeff. Sitting on pledge and forward test is Angie Bailey, VP Compensation Consulting with Salary.com, and also Paul Harris Fellow.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now please join me for the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do.
Is it true?
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
Thanks, Angie. Rotarians, now time for guests. Please introduce your guests, your name first, and their name and title and where they work. And also guests, as your name is, just no guest today. Okay, that was brief. I want to remind everybody of our membership initiative and the opportunity to have lunch covered with a prospective Rotarian that you bring as a guest. When you see leaders in our community being recognized, make sure they understand Rotary and invite them to a meeting. I hope you're marking your calendar for all the events coming up in the next few weeks. We need a few volunteers for this Saturday to help clean up the Louisville Knot sign, which that was Greg Brown's idea initially. He did a great job with that. I want to just keep it up to speed because it's up to us, not the city, to manage that. On Saturday, I think it's 9:30 to noon, what time it is. We talked to Greg Brown about that. We have a few more spots open for the tour of GE Appliances on April 23rd from 10 to noon. That's really going to be quite an opportunity. I think I don't know how many are left. It's really a good opportunity to see latest and greatest in manufacturing. I see Kent Boyler for that on details. Our district governor, Tom Reed, will attend a meeting next Thursday to share about the Purple Pinky project. For $130 donation in support of polio eradication, you'll receive a 750 milliliter bottle of 8-year-old Russell's bourbon, dressed purple wax. Only a few bottles are still available from the original 156 that were bottled from our private barrel. We expect to net about $8,000 for the charity for Polio Plus, and these contributions will be triple thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which does 2-for-1 for all donations on polio, and getting us even closer to a polio-free world. Louisville Suburban Club, which is a lot smaller than ours, had 9 donors, so we got to be able to beat that. Come on. The early bird registration for the deadline for the district conference is April 19th. The conference is held here in Louisville at the Marriott East from May 10th to 11th. It's only $99 if you sign up by April 19th. It goes up to $129 the next day, so try to get on that as soon as you can. Please join Laurie, Delaney, and me, and many other fellow Rotarians at this important and interesting event. Several members of our club are actually speaking at that, including Scott Collins, Whitney Austin, and Alex Novak, and somebody by the name of past President Gene West, one of our best-time presidents ever, will serve as the mistress of ceremonies for those 2 days. You find more details about this in Sparks, different links. And I'd like to invite to the podium to introduce today's speaker, the incoming president-elect, Ken Salvaggi, general manager of ESPN Louisville, and Paul Harris, fellow plus two. Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, President Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go with the glasses.
It's actually big print there, Ken.
Gene McLean is a creator and producer. He produced thousands of articles as a sports writer and columnist for 11 years at the Lexington Herald-Leader. That included 8 years as a beat writer for the Cincinnati Reds and 8 years covering the Kentucky Derby. In addition to covering Kentucky amateur golf, the Ohio Valley Conference, schools like EKU, his alma mater, Murray State, Morehead State. He also covered special events like the NCAA Final Four, U.S. Open Golf Tournament, Major League Baseball's All-Star Game, and the Little League World Series. He created a public relations, governmental relations company and represented major industry groups in the Commonwealth and nation. He created the Pressbox, an online website that covers the day-to-day operations of all Kentucky thoroughbred racetracks and other racing venues nationwide. As publisher, Gene writes a daily column and oversees all editorial content, and his advertising boosters include Churchill Downs, Kentucky Downs, Turfway and Willis Parks, and many others. He helped create a private membership club in downtown Louisville, the Louisville Thoroughbred Society, pretty big one. He served as executive vice president of the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association and the Kentucky Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association, and was actively involved in getting simulcast legislation passed to help promote thoroughbred racing throughout Kentucky and beyond. He was the first president of Kentucky Off-Track Betting Inc. and established 4 off-track wagering facilities throughout the Commonwealth. And he's been honored as a Sports Writer of the Year in Kentucky, the Ohio Valley Conference Hall of Fame Media Division, and an outstanding alumni in the Mass Communications Department at Eastern Kentucky University. He's got a couple of sons and a daughter. One son just finished up a stint as the chief of staff for the governor. He's also got 4 grandsons, and most importantly, he's the pride of Midway, Kentucky, Gene McLean.
Appreciate it very much. That is a long introduction for a short resume, right? My mom would say I couldn't hold a job very long, so that's the reason there were so many things there to do. I brought this hat up because my glasses on, definitely need those. Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure to be here today to join with you and have lunch with you and to tell you how much that I and others in this community appreciate all the work and donation of time and commitment and energy and talent that the Rotarians do to make our community better. And this is the best community I've ever lived in. And my mother is 93 years old, and she just got her driver's license renewed for 8 years. And when she was going to get her driver's license renewed, she called, I asked, Mom, are you sure you want to do that? And she goes, well, why not? So she immediately called me and she said, I got it for 8 years. And I said, well, you sure? And she goes, well, why wouldn't I be driving in 8 years? And I said, exactly. And anyway, it's my pleasure anytime anybody invites me to talk about Churchill Downs with the Kentucky Derby. I rarely turn it down because it's the most amazing event that I've ever had the pleasure to be involved in, both professionally and publicly and as a spectator. And it does so much for our Commonwealth and for each and every Kentuckian, whether you were birthed in Kentucky or have transferred here later in life. A buddy of mine once said, I wasn't born in Kentucky, but I came as fast as I could. And that is a true testament, I think. I brought my hat up. I hope you don't mind that I use it occasionally here because my hair does fall down in my eyes. And my mother asked me, she goes, Gene, why do you wear your hair this long? And at the supper table, I looked around and every one of my relatives didn't have any hair. And I said, because I can. And so she said, well, that's right. But anyway, I hope that doesn't offend anyone. I'll take it off as soon as I quit reading. A couple of passages from a couple of books that I really wanted to quote from today. They're both important to me, and both as growing up and as fans of Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby. I wanted to say that as I was walking in to speak at another event a couple of weeks ago, I overheard someone said, well, he kind of looks a little rough. And I said, you know, I had the same exact thought when I woke up and saw myself in the mirror. I never envisioned 40-some years ago that I would look like this, but I'm happy that I look like something. And but I always think, you know, you kind of envision, I always think that I look a lot like Dan Bork. You know, I mean, Dan's a handsome, he's a member, and, you know, he's one of Churchill Downs' estates coordinator, and a very striking and well-dressed and handsome young man. And I always think every morning I'm going to look like that in the mirror, and for some reason I don't. But he is a true gentleman, and I want to say before I start, I told Bill Kirstangen and Bill Mudd, and I know Bill used to work with you, Kevin, and you know, I told them on Thanksgiving, I was walking out, and here comes Bill Kirstangen, and he's walking out through the main turnstiles with everybody else, and I grabbed Bill Kirstangen, and I said, hey, Bill, I know somebody that might be able to get you a special parking place in this, you know, because Bill is the CEO and the power of being at Churchill Downs, and he had his family with him. He kind of chuckled. He goes, no, I walked out and parked right out there with you. And I said, well, you got a long walk. So, but the thing that impresses me most about Churchill Downs, quite honestly, is the depth of their talent and the commitment, the quality of their individuals. I've never been associated or witnessed a corporation of its size, and here it is, $1 billion corporation in the middle of our city that has the depth of personnel and people that are not only professionally qualified to hold the job, but also are quality individuals. They're just really, really good people. And I advise, if you can get to know any of those as you walk through this world together, they're wonderful and beautiful, and they're committed to trying to present a world-class event in a world-class way with world-class individuals. And I think that speaks volumes for why the institution is really so outstanding today. I'm going to read a couple of things, if you don't mind. I'm not a hoarder, although my wife would argue with that. I just tell her I'm a collector. So I'm going to try my best, thank you, to read a couple of things. Thank you, dear. I appreciate it so much. This is a book, Down the Stretch, written by, it's the story of Colonel Matt Wynn. And if you know the history of Churchill Downs, Matt Wynn was the guy who saved Churchill Downs and really created the Derby for getting it started on its 150th journey till this first Saturday in May. And this book is original. I found it at an old bookstore, and I've gotten the presidents of Churchill Downs, who I have known through the years. I bought this for $10, and I've had it for 40 years. But I get the presidents of Churchill Downs as they come and go to autograph the front of it for me. I never knew Matt Wynn. You probably understand why when I quote the first sentence. But I've gotten to know, I was really good friends with Warner Jones, who owned Hermitage Farm out in Oldham County. And Warner was really kind of a, patriarch, not only to Churchill, but also mentored a lot of young people on life's journey. And anyway, this is from the story of Colonel Matt Wynn, and I'm just going to read very briefly. On page 1, he said, late in the autumn of 1902, Charlie Price, a former newspaper editor and the secretary of Churchill Downs racetrack, dropped into my office, sat down, and without preliminary, bluntly asked me to buy the Churchill Downs property. Why should I do that? I encountered. Because, replied Price, if you don't buy it, the track will have to close and there won't be any more Kentucky Derbies. You know, that in itself, is an amazing statement on why we're sitting here with 150 derbies coming up in just a couple of weeks. He said, and I quote, I took my time, plenty of it, but I knew very well what the decision would be. What other decision could there be when I thought of Churchill Downs in the afternoons of gentle springtime and the golden haze of autumn, Churchill Downs of fragrant memories, where all through the years friends had gathered to tell their stories and have their laughs, to dine and wine, to play the horses of their choice, and winner or loser, wend their separate ways, only to be back the next day to live again in the exciting thrill-packed crossover that is a racetrack. I think that speaks to the emotion of where Churchill Downs was in 1902. And give you a little history perspective of why it's really important to us Kentuckians today. Because when you stand on that first Saturday in May in part of that magnificent stadium that will be filled with 150 to 165,000 people, and they all sing My Old Kentucky Home, if you don't feel that emotion, then I think probably that you're buried somewhere in the family cemetery. But this is a quote from a book called Shoemaker, America's Greatest Jockey, Bill Shoemaker, who I had the opportunity to cover when I was writing. And before his tragic accident, he was in a car accident that left him as a paraplegic from the neck down. But he signed this book for me before that occurred. And I just want to read very quickly what he says about the Kentucky Derby. He says, the Derby wasn't a new thing for me. No, sir. This was my 24th Derby. This was in when he was riding Ferdinand at the age of 54. 54 years old. He's riding Ferdinand in the Kentucky Derby. He said, the Derby wasn't a new thing for me. No, sir. This was my 24th Derby. More rides than anyone in history. I had been on 3 winners before and should have had another one on Gallant Man, but I made a terrible mistake by standing up on him in the stirrups before the finish line, and just when I had a real shot, a shot for the roses. Now it was the 112th Derby, and 120,000 people were singing My Old Kentucky Home. And if you've never been to the Derby, if you've never heard them singing, you don't know how it feels to be on a coat, going towards the gate, walking slowly, maybe even cantering. And if you're sitting chilly, well then you don't have any blood in you at all. I think those 2 passages from 2 of the people that have experienced the Derby, maybe more than most have, speaks to the Kentucky Derby and why this year at 150th that we celebrate like it has been no other. I attended 26 Derbies in a row. I happened to be in St. Martin and missed my 27th in a row and didn't have a bad time. It was pretty nice. But I've been to most Derbies in my life. I remember my first one, and I remember my last one, and I remember them all in between for the experience that they all have given me. I covered Genuine Risk, who was one of 3 fillies to win the Derby. I also covered Winning Colors, who was a second filly to win the Kentucky Derby. So 2 out of the 3. The one I didn't get was Regret, and she was about that 1900s span. Someone once said, I know you covered Regret, but what was the other one? So I didn't get to see Regret, but I did see the other 2 fillies. I stood outside, the trainer for Genuine Risk was a guy named Leroy Jolly. He was the son of a Hall of Fame trainer named Moody Jolly, and Moody was well named because he was really kind of moody and most of the time on the sour side. And that apple didn't fall too far from the tree. So Leroy, the year he had Genuine Risk, everybody and at that time there were hundreds of media, press, the newspapers always ended up on the front page, on the front porch, and we always covered the Derby as it was the Super Bowl, which it is. And nobody would go by to see Leroy because Leroy was known to be a little on the sour side like his dad, Moody. Well, I being young and you know, trying to impress somebody, I don't know who, but I just parked myself outside of the barn and waited. And you always got there early because Moody or Leroy would take his horses to the track around 5:30 or before, so it was break of dawn. So I stood at the barn from 5:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Finally, Leroy comes out of the barn and he goes, "I don't know who the heck you are," and didn't use the word heck. But I am trying to adhere to absolutely the terms and conditions of the contract. He goes, "I don't know who you are or what you want, but it seems to me that you're not going to leave until I talk to you. So what is it that you want and how quickly can I get you out of here?" And I said, "Mr. Jolly, I know your race record. I know that this filly has a legitimate shot or you wouldn't be in it. And I'd just like to know your thoughts of Genuine Risk going into the Derby." And every morning after that, all Derby week, I would show up at 5:30 in the morning. And he would look at me and kind of drop his head. Well, by Wednesday or Thursday, he would just come over. And all the other media would then kind of start moving. He goes, "If they get another step closer, I'm going in." So I said, "Listen, I'll share my notes with all of you all, but he doesn't want to talk to anybody else." So anyway, Leroy Jolly gets to Derby Day, he wins, and he looks over and he sees me and he goes, "My God, I don't know if you're a good luck charm or a bad rabbit's foot, but you might as well come along and do another interview before I leave." So it just goes to show that a lot of people may not, embrace the initial, but it is the longevity of the commitment to do something right. And I felt like it was my job to tell that story. And I although inadequately, I always felt that my stories were inadequate. My first year I covered the Derby, it was packed. The Pressbox at that time was major. And I had a seat out on the balcony, and I'm afraid of heights. So I got out the door and I kind of did one of these numbers and got to my chair and I sat down and I looked over to my left and my seatmate was Red Smith. If you know Red Smith, he's the greatest sports writer of all time. He was from New York, and I looked over and I said, "Oh my gosh." And he kind of looked at me, a brash 20-some-year-old kid, and he goes, "How are you?" And I said, "I'm doing fine, Mr. Smith." And he goes, "It's Red." And I said, "I'm doing fine, Mr. Smith." Anyway, we talked a little bit, and I said, "I don't want to bother you." He goes, "No, I know." He goes, I'm going to lean on you because I don't know a lot about horses." He goes, "Do you know anything about horses?" And I said, "Well, my grandfather taught me about yearlings when I was 4 years old. And he used to take me to the barn." And so we started to talk, and we developed this great friendship. And he was a fantastic person on top of being an impressive Hall of Fame rider. And those are the things that I took away from my experiences. For the most part, whether or not it was Leroy Jolly who just didn't like to talk or find friends very easily, or if it was Red Smith who found friends very easily, but people were intimidated by his reputation. I always found it interesting that most people, once you tear back that cover and open up their book, that they're really willing to talk to you about what is meaningful to them and what is important to them. And it enriches your individual life. That is what the Derby means to me. I have just a few notes, and Ashley told me I had 2.5 hours. So, just kidding. You know, I covered the Derby when Swale won, and it was the first time ever in the history of Claiborne Farm, which is the oldest and at that time the biggest stallion operation in the thoroughbred game. It was founded by Bull Hancock. His father imported horses from Virginia to stand at stud in Paris, Kentucky, to get them away from the Civil War. That's how far the bloodlines went back to Claiborne Farm. And then Bull Hancock passed it. When he passed, Seth Hancock, at the young age of 23, took over the helm of Claiborne Farm. You may remember that his first big deal was he syndicated Secretariat. And Secretariat was the biggest stallion deal ever syndicated. And at the age of 23, Seth Hancock did that, along with Penny Chinnery and the owners of Secretariat. But Swale was the first horse and only horse that Claiborne Farm had to win the Kentucky Derby. And even to this day, Claiborne's still in operation. They breed horses, they stand stallions. But Seth and I got to be very good friends. And after the win, we went to the director's room, just he and I. And at that time, the press was allowed in the winner's circle, so I was in the winner's circle. Then I got to go to the director's room with Seth. And I said, Seth, you know, now that Claiborne has won its first Kentucky Derby, what does it mean to you? And he said, well, it means a lot to the family. It means a lot that we were able to do this with my dad, who started Claiborne Farm. It means a lot to all the employees at Claiborne Farm, the history, the heritage. And he goes, but you know what? You know, it means so much more to others than it does to me personally, because of the impact of now that we have won one. The pressure will build on how do we ever do it again. Seth has now turned over the operation at that farm to his son, Walker Hancock, and I'm hopeful that Walker has the same experience as Seth did. I'll tell you a very quick story. I covered the Reds for 8 years, and that's when Pete Rose came back, and I'm a big fan of Pete Rose, and he's still a very personal friend of mine. And no matter what you may think, and you know, we all make mistakes in our life, and we have to pay for those either publicly or privately. But Pete, I was the player manager of the Reds, and so I took Seth, who was a huge Reds fan, and I took him with me when I covered one of the games. We walked in the clubhouse, went to Pete's office, and the press always did a story before the game, and that kind of filled your spot on the page until the game was over and you wrote your game story, and that went into the same spot. So anyway, we were down there. We walk in, and Pete's office was about as big as these two. It's very small. So we walk in, and we're in the back, and Pete looks up and he sees me, and he goes, guys, there's somebody very important just walked into this room. And Seth was very private, wouldn't say much, and very, very shy. And he goes, Mr. Seth Hancock, the owner of Claiborne Farm, just walked into my office. And immediately, all baseball talk ceased. And Pete goes, Seth, 49ers running in the Travers Stakes on Saturday up in Saratoga. He goes, what is 49ers chances? And Seth goes, well, you know, he's doing good, Pete. And he goes, Seth, how good is he doing? And he goes, well, you know, Pete, you know, he's going to probably be 1 to 5 in the odds. He's doing really good. You know, we think the world of him. Woody Stevens was training him, and we think the world of him. We think he's going to be a really good horseman. It's horse racing, and he goes, Seth, I need to know one thing: is he going to win? And so Seth goes, yeah, Pete, I think he's probably going to win. So obviously Pete was looking for an angle to make sure he got a bet down on 49er in the Travers Stakes. I'll finish a Pete Rose story for all those who might have wonders about Pete. My dad was 90 years old, 89 in 3 months. He was 3 months away from his 90th birthday. And he got terminally ill, and hospice had been called in. And I never understood why they called it the living room, because they brought the bed in, and he was in his living room. And I asked my dad, I said, Dad, is there anything that you really want? You know, this is probably a 2-week at the maximum kind of deal. And he goes, everybody's with Pete. I'd like to talk to Pete Rose. And Pete had long since had been retired, and I had long since moved on. So I called a number and I left a message on a voicemail. It didn't say this is Pete Rose or anything. It just said leave a message. I left a message, and about 2 days later, I'm sitting at the lunch table with Mom, and I get a call, and I look down, and I think it's one of those robocalls or whatever. Somebody trying to sell me something. It's from Los Angeles. I don't know why, but I answered it. And he goes, "Hey, Gino, this is Pete. Like we talk every day." I mean, And I said, "Hey, Pete." He goes, "How's things going?" We talked for 5 or 10 minutes. He goes, "Is your pops there?" And I said, "How'd you know?" That's what I called my dad. He goes, "I did my homework." He goes, "Your pop's there?" And I said, "Yeah, he's in." I said, "Hold on." So I took it in, I put it on speaker, and I handed it to my dad. It was in his bed, and Mom came in, and she started videoing it. He goes, "Mr. McLean," he goes, "you ready to go to Turfway Park?" And this is now in February. And it's cold. And my dad's in the hospice bed. And Pete goes, "You want to go to Turfway tonight?" And my dad goes, "Pete, if I ever went to Turfway Park, it'd be with you in February." And he goes, "Put a coat on, we're going to freeze our asses." And they talked for 25 minutes. And my dad was a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. He loved Pete Rose. He took me to Crosley Field, the old baseball field in Cincinnati. I've got original stuff. I actually have a chair that I bought that is from Crosley Field. We tracked it down. It had been sold to the Red Mile in Lexington, a harness track. And so we tracked it down. I got this chair, the old stadium chair from Crosley Field, and a buddy of mine restored it, kept the original paint. And so I put a brass tag on it that says Crosley Field Stadium seat reserved for Ira B. McLean Jr., which was my dad. And it sits in my office, and every day I spend 5 minutes in that chair. And for some reason, it's our connection. And I don't know, there's 23,000 of those stadium seats. I don't know if he ever sat in or not, but there's a possibility he did. And it's that connection. And that's the same thing I want to leave you with, and I'll wrap up because I could talk forever. That's the same connection I get to Churchill Downs and to the Kentucky Derby. I have the good fortune to own horses. I've won a race at Churchill Downs. I had a horse with my partner one time that we ran second in the Illinois Derby, and we ended up 21 on the money list for the Kentucky Derby. And I always thought there'd be somebody that would drop out, we could get in, and I could walk over and make that magnificent walk, and we never got that chance. Nobody scratched. And I didn't go to the Derby that year. I went and watched a movie, and I cried like a baby. Because we grew up, I told you my grandfather was a yearling guy, and he would take me to barns, and so yearlings are one-year-old horses. They're kind of baby horses, and he taught me how to treat them and how to walk them and how to put them on a halter and how to go to a lead. And so I've always dreamed of being somewhere in that game, knowing full well what the chances are likely to never happen. But I will leave you with this story. My partner and I, we bred a horse. I claimed this mare at the fairgrounds in Louisiana for $5,000. And the guy trainer I called, I said, "We get her?" And he goes, "Yeah, you got her." I said, "Well, what does she look like?" He said, "Well, she's got an ankle on her as big as your head, and you can count every rib." And I said, "Well, send her home. She's going to be a brood." So we get her home, we fattened her up, and we bred her to, I had a seasoned Cozine at the time. He stood at Gainesway, which John Gaines was a good buddy. And anyway, we bred to Cozine, and a year later, we've had a foal, a beautiful gray foal, and we named her, and she became kind of our go-to mare. And we ended up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies race at Churchill Downs. First time Churchill Downs ever had the Breeders' Cup. She ended up in the 2-year-old fillies race. She had won 4 stakes in a row down in Florida. We came up and we ran the Alcibiades. We ran off and we ran last. Came over, we weren't even going to run the Breeders' Cup. And our jockey came over and said, "You need to run her. She's doing great on this track." And anyway, we load the gate and we are coming for home, and we get stopped at the 8th pole, but we run second with a filly that I claimed her mother for $5,000. I bred her to a stallion that was worth $10,000. We run second in a $1 million Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies race. And I was coming off the track, and I was mad because if we hadn't gotten stopped, we would have won that race. And out of nowhere, Seth Hancock grabs me by the arm. And he pulls me aside and goes, I know you're upset because you should have won. I said, yeah, Seth, we should have won that race. He goes, how many horses did you breed that year? I said, we bred one. He goes, we breed 350 mares. How many horses did we have in the race? I said, you didn't have any. He goes, exactly. He goes, you were in there, next to you, Sheikh Mohammed had a horse, Queen Elizabeth had a horse, Will Farish, who owns Lane's Inn Farm, had a horse, Ashford Stud had 3 horses, and you ran second. And he goes, take the second and enjoy the rest of it. I leave you with this. Churchill Downs is remarkable. It's important. It's an economic engine that drives not only this city, but the whole Commonwealth of Kentucky. If we stand on the first Saturday in May and sing that song, not because of its history, but because of what it means to us, and we sing it with deep emotion, because we are all in this thing together. And it's what you go anywhere in the world and they know us by Kentucky Fried Chicken and Kentucky Derby and bourbon. And I don't eat chicken and I don't eat bourbon, but I do race horses. But anyway, thank you so much. I hope
Just a coincidence, maybe this guy is more powerful than I think, because at 12:27 p.m. today, okay, I got this thing, the latest news from Claiborne Farms. They must have listened to you. There it is, huh? Got an email from Claiborne Farms as you were talking. This guy is something else.
you know, the good Lord works in mysterious ways.
In fact, he's so good, he can tell you what horses to bet on next 2 weeks from now. And you have 2 choices. One, you can follow his advice, or 2, I can tell you which horse I'm betting on. Then there'll only be 19 horses left that might win. Mine's guaranteed to lose. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, Gene, I think what we all want to know is, what does the Derby look like this year? We saw Sierra Leone on Saturday, looked awesome. Who are you kind of focusing? I know we still got a few weeks, but who are you focusing in on? What do you look for when you're picking the horse that you think is going to be the winner?
Those are all great questions. You know, the Derby is going to be 20 horses, and that's a challenge in its own right. I tell everybody, there's a one surefire way to double your money at the racetrack. Does anybody know? How you double your money? Absolutely guaranteed. You fold it in half and stick it together. But you know, my mother once said, when I was a kid, I was into racing a lot, and she came to me and she goes, Gene, I think you got a gambling problem. And I said, Mom, I bet you 100 I don't. And she goes, you know, Gene, you're going to have to grow up. If you study the Wall Street Journal as much as you do that racing form, you would be a millionaire someday. And I said, if I keep betting on those horses, I still may make it. But great questions. Sierra Leone is a fantastic horse. Just won the Bluegrass Stakes. Ran and won the Risen Star. He's a deep closer. And that style of race is not easily converted to the Derby because you got so many traffic issues. And you got so many horses to come in and around and go through. And so it's not the preferred style of racing in the Derby because of truly the traffic issues. I thought he would be compromised in the Bluegrass. I love the horse. I think he's outstanding. He's trained by Chad Brown. He ran a great race. Keeneland is always speed favoring. They run 2 very short meets, so it's hard to get a grasp on what is going to hold in Keeneland, but it's always, from the day I was born to today, it favors speed. And he has no speed. But he won the Bluegrass very impressively, and coming wide. and he's legitimate, and he's a horse that you're going to root for because he just has that gut and grind and credibility. He never gives up. He's coming, he's coming, he's coming. Kind of like Zenyatta in the Breeders' Cup Classic when you thought she was going to get there to beat Blaine. But anyway, Sierra Leone is going to be one of the top 3 horses that will be in the odds. Probably the favorite is going to be a horse named Fierceness. Won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year at Santa Anita. It's out of City of Light, and a talented young stallion that was trained by John Sadler on the West Coast. Fierceness did not run well in his first start this year in the Holy Bull. They gave him some time off. He came back and he won the Florida Derby about 12 1/4 lengths. Impressive. The Florida Derby has become a preeminent Derby prep. Very similar to Always Dreaming, if you remember him. He's trained by Todd Pletcher. The thing that I think you got to watch, and I have not written about this, but I noticed we don't have a media anymore outside of ESPN. They're fantastic. We don't have a print medium much anymore. We don't have a racing medium much anymore. But I saw in the pictures the horse had some patches on a couple of his feet, and normally that's done if they have a quarter crack or are prone to have quarter cracks. I know that there's a veterinarian, a farrier out of New Jersey by the name of Ian McNerney, I think is his last name, but he's got a very progressive patch that he puts on horse. The difference between his race in the Holy Bull and his race in the Florida Derby was so significant that I think probably his feet were feeling much, much better in the second one, and the patches probably worked. But if you remember a year ago, Mike Rapoli and Todd Pletcher had a horse named Forte that was scratched the morning of the Derby for a foot problem. And so I think they're probably doing some preemptive work to try to prevent that from happening this year. I would want to see Fierceness on the track the Derby week and look at his, as my granddaddy say, no feet, no horse. And, there are just some horses, their feet are a little more brittle. If you have a lot of white on the bottom of your feet, they tend to hold moisture more. And so feet are hooves are an important aspect, and the farrier is very, very important. So Fierceness is a horse that I would be more skeptical of in terms of I want to see him on the track that week here, and they have to be on the grounds at a certain time now. The horse that I love, I just don't know if the race style is Sierra Leone. But there are other horses in there as we get closer. Look at the Pressbox, LTS.com. I will be reporting really nearly every day. I happened to get lucky a year ago, and I know you've got a question. I hit the pick 5 last year on the Derby and won $34,000. I had 5 horses in the Derby, so at Mage I had 5 horses live, and a couple of Brad Cox's horses I would have been paid $100,000. I missed the pick 6 in the first leg by a horse. His name was No Balls. And it was a gelding. And so he's aptly named. But I did not bet him. He paid like $60-some to win. I didn't have him, so I'm out of the pick 6. But the pick 6 last year paid over $1 million. So I'm interested in looking at the pick 6.
You wouldn't have bet if you won that one, brother.
No, you spend money, you never spend your memories, right? So, yes, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate your storytelling, and my name is Larry Sloan. And first of all, could I subscribe to your picks for the pick 6 for this Derby? Oh, you do?
I have go to the link, and it's the Pressbox LTS. This stands for Local Thoroughbred Society. .com. That'll take you right to my link, and I give them out free. And all my handicapping stats I keep updated, so you'll know what my win percentages are and everything else. So there's 3 things in life my daddy told me never to predict. Never predict what a politician's going to do, and I spent 30 years as a lobbyist. Never predict what your kids are going to do, because whatever you say about them in 30 seconds, they're going to prove you wrong. And third, never predict the outcome of a horse race. Well, I violated all three of those. So anyway, I put all my picks on there free, so I hope you go and check them out.
Well, that wasn't going to be my original
Yes.
question. It was sort of a joke, but my question is, there are a lot of horses that break down, and we know that that's a problem. Is that inbreeding or something else?
Fantastic question, Larry. And I think the thing that has improved immensely are two or three things. One, I think the science, because we don't have enough data. And so we're collecting data for the first time on, where in the race are horses having problems. Is it the first 16th? Is it the second mile? Or is it the final? Where on the racetrack are most of the injuries occurring? Secondly, what can we do to improve the quality of the racetrack? And so all of this data needs to be collected before anybody can give you a definitive answer. And that's why I hesitate when somebody like Mark Cassie, who's a good guy, I like Mark, and a great trainer up in Canada. I mean, his son's a really good trainer. But when you immediately say we all need to go to all-weather surfaces or artificial surfaces, they don't. They're making a statement that's not based on science or data. And so data collection is really now kind of being the first time. I do think breeding is a question. I think what we do to young horses before they get to the racetrack is a question. I'm not a fan of 2-year-old sales because you press horses to go a quarter of a mile in less than 10 seconds so they sell well. Well, a lot of them aren't prepared at that age to go. And so horses are like every one of us. I mean, I've lived 68 years and I've never really seen anybody unfortunate enough to look like me. We're all different. Horses are different. Horses are really personalities that you've got to manage. Some are high-spirited, some aren't. Some are ready to go younger, some aren't. So you try to breeding, but though inbreeding is a question that raises. In this country, we breed for speed. We want speed. We want horses to run great as 2-year-olds. We want horses to run fast at 6 furlongs or 7 furlongs. Then we want them to run a mile and a quarter. Well, when you're asking a horse a lot of different things in a breeding scenario. Now, I think there are some crosses and pedigrees and niches that work. But you got to be careful of not inbreeding too much that make the bone and the structure alignment fragile. And I think we've pushed that envelope. But again, it's got to be data. And I think what's really interesting is some of the really outstanding stallions that we have in the marketplace today, with the exception maybe Justify, weren't the greatest racehorses. They were really good racehorses, but they weren't the greatest racehorses. And why is that? And I'm a really big fan of the dam side. And so I think the mother side has to have certain qualifications. And that not necessarily the first dam, but the second dam and the third dam, they have to have some real credentials, both on the racetrack and in the breeding shed. Great question, don't have an answer for you, but I think an answer is coming because we now have engaged the scientists to do the data research. And so maybe in a year we could say, yeah, most injuries occur in the first quarter, or they occur on the backside, or they occur in the stretch. Do they occur when horses are more stressed? Do they occur when the weather is different? Bleeding is an issue that we have to be very concerned about. If you can't breathe and you don't have a foot, you can't run. And so a lot of those are real interesting questions. I've got my opinion, just like Mark Cassie has an opinion. And we all have opinions. But opinions are, there's an old saying, opinion, you probably know it. And most of them stink. me. And so until we have data, I would be afraid to even venture a guess. But the data's coming, and I am a fan of HISA. They've had some learning curves. HISA is the new federally mandated oversight committee that now federally has put in place some drug limitations and penalties and all of those things. I'm a fan of that. We need universal rules. We need to have a universal system of penalties because, as you know, the child isn't disciplined, and I'm not suggesting, but children need to be disciplined. We need to be disciplined. People need to be disciplined. And there has to be a penalty if you don't. So, it's a long-winded answer.
First of all, I want to thank the speakers committee. They just knock it out of the park every time. But anyway, my question is, why did you found the Thoroughbred Society?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. It was a labor of love. I'm from Midway, so I grew up 10 miles from Keeneland, and in the horse business. And they have a club right outside of Keeneland called the Thoroughbred Club, which is a nice little house. It was on the old Firestone farm. If you ever drank Firestone wine, the Firestones really had owned that farm. They had a lot of really nice horses at one time. But they had a house there, and they converted that to the Thoroughbred Club. So if you're ever at Keeneland, there's a white house on Rice Road that's right by Keeneland, and that's the Thoroughbred Club. And that's where I would always go to hang out with buddies and friends, and my daughter's a very expensive wedding, which she got even. But anyway, when I moved to Louisville, I met a young lady, and she's the youngest graduate in the history of the U of L Law School. And she is beautiful, and she saved my life, and I love her dearly, but she wanted to live in Louisville. And I said, okay, then I'm moving to Louisville. And when I got here, I had a partner I owned horses with, and I said, where do you go in Louisville when Churchill's not running? He goes, well, we really don't have, I mean, you can go there to do simulcasts and stuff, but we don't really have a place. And I said, if I live long enough, we're going to have a place. So about a year later, he calls me out of the blue, and he says, hey, what are you doing? And I said, I'm piddling around. He goes, come on down. I bought a building downtown Louisville. I want you to look at it and see if it'll fit for that thing you were talking about. So I walked down, I walked in. I said, Mike, this is it. This is it. It's a 100-year-old building. It's I don't know how many of you have been there. If you haven't, it'd be my pleasure. If you could come, just call, and we'll get you in and take a look. But the building is all wood. It's an amazing building, and it was heated originally by coal, so it all had coal dust everywhere. So they brought these things they shoot T-shirts in, at ball games, something that looked like that. They put walnut shells in it, and they started shooting the rafters with these walnut shells, and I mean, it was stuff falling everywhere. And the beams just became beautiful wood, got down to the original wood. And I said, Mike, look at this. I mean, this is fantastic. And so Mike Schnell is my partner, and it wouldn't have happened without Mike. He's the best. And he owns a concrete business here in town, does a lot of contract work. But anyway, the building turned out great. We had the largest humidor. We have an outside patio. We have a smoking pavilion for just cigars. And so the largest bourbon selection that you can find. And one bottle of rum. Long-haired hippie. Whose name might be attached. They always one bottle of rum because when I get to 2 bottles of rum, I start building an LTS. They asked me if I had a good retirement. When I left Frankfurt, I was a lobbyist for 30 years, and I said I did until we started building this thing. To borrow from Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. We survived COVID. We survived a situation in Louisville and downtown, and we had a fire in our service elevator, and I told Mike one day, I said, if the locusts come up over the river, I'm out. But it is. I'm actually going down there and meet a friend who's running for Congress up in Indiana right after we're done. And it's a beautiful place to go, have lunch, meet friends. You can bet on any horse race at Churchill Downs. Simulcast, you can bet on them. We have a sports betting kiosk. So we have, but it's a beautiful place. We've got a great staff. And it was something I wanted to do. And I hope the legacy lives on, because it's a great place to go and socialize and take friends and watch races. Bill Carstangen asked me about 6 months ago if I would be his guest on Derby 150, and I said, Bill, I'd love to be, but I'm going to be right at LTS. And he said, I understand. When we started LTS, and I'm sorry that Kevin's wife, Lori, I know Lori's mother. Lori's mother is Priscilla is one of my dearest best friends. She worked for Tony Thompson, who was the majority whip. But anyway, long story is we introduced that we're going to build LTS Derby Week, and Bill Mudd and Bill Carstangen were on the backside, and they came up, and I had a Breeders' Cup hat on, and they said, Bill Mudd took his hat off, and he goes, we're going to be partners, you better put a Derby hat on. So I did, and the only promise I made, I told him, I said, we won't embarrass you. And so we had first meal we ever served at LTS. We had Bill Carstangen and Bill Mudd, their leading, trust team there, their leadership team, and Bill Carstangen stood up and made the first toast ever at LTS, and he said, Gene, you didn't embarrass us, which meant the world to me. So.
I'm glad you didn't get tired of that, because that club has to really is. And Walt hit it right. We get great speakers. We want to thank Ashley and others in the committee, Ken, as a matter of fact. The next week's speaker, of course, right here, same time, is Ali Trotman, CEO and president of Wicked Technologies. I don't know her from Wicked Sheets many years ago. Not too many years ago. But she converted to doing more things, and now it's Wicked Technologies. She's really exciting. She's really a funny speaker. She's very insightful too. So come here next week and have a good meeting. Have a good meeting. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.